Today's reading comes from Luke 10, verses 38 through 42. Now as they went on their way, Jesus entered a village, and a woman named Martha welcomed him into her home. And she had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet and listened to his teaching. But Martha was distracted with much serving, and she went up to him and said, "Lord, do you not care that my sister has left me to serve alone? Tell her then to help me." But the Lord answered her, "Martha, Martha, you are anxious and troubled about many things, but one thing is necessary. Mary has chosen the good portion, which will not be taken away from her." Thus reads the ending of the word.
You may be seated. Well, good morning to all of you. I was hoping that Catherine would speak this morning, but circumstances didn't work that way, so I get to preach again. And this past week, Nancy and I went out to our favorite place in Klamath Falls of Train Mountain, and as many of you know, I am what scientists call a feral ecologist, which is a train enthusiast or iron horse enthusiast. And we were planning to come home yesterday. We came home on Friday, the good thing. We had our fun in spite of the thunderstorms and the rain, and we were in a tent trailer. That's always exciting. And the fact that my controller on my train was acting up, but we saw our friends, had a great time, got a good assignment for this next winter project. So yesterday, I was working on the sermon, and something I don't like to do at the last minute, it's kind of like opening a can of stew instead of having a stew simmer on the stove for a while, of your homemade stew, but it works. It's not a new idea of last minute preparation. I don't like it. I like to have a good sense of where I'm going with my sermons way before. But I remember a time I had an interesting thing happen to me. We were vacationing in Glacier National Park, and we were just outside the park. There's another circumstance, and we drove into a campground called Mini Glacier, and there was an amphitheater there, and it's going to be a worship service on that Sunday morning. And so as we're driving, Nancy said something to me about, were you thinking about have you been thinking about a sermon? And I thought, yeah, it could be. The speaker doesn't show up. I don't know what's going to happen. So I got to we got the amphitheater, and I want to tell you, honestly, I did not want to go in. Because the ranger had set up a telescope right there, and he had spotted a silver-tipped grizzly walking down the trail. And people were in line looking at the scope and seeing this grizzly. I was in that line. Nancy's saying, come on, the surface. Just wait. And of course, wouldn't you know, when I got up there, ranger's looking again. He said, you just walked in the bushes. There went my chance, okay? So I'm in the service, and we're sitting there for 5-6 minutes. Someone says, well, looks like the preacher didn't show up. And I said, I'm the preacher. Well, it's all yours. So what do? What songs do you sing? How do you put a service together as it's going? Prayer. I mean, you don't take an offering, not in those kind of situations. That's a way to disperse a crowd, I guess. But it worked, I guess. People thanked me for afterwards, and I believe God was honored. I'd prefer to have more time to get it polished. I like to have order of things. I like to have the order. But I also know that God uses disorder, as hard as that may be acceptable for some of you. In the story of Martha and Mary, we have to see that God is using both these women. One is orderly, one is a little less orderly, perhaps. Mary's actions are given the nod by Jesus. And we cannot see this as a competition between Mary and Martha, or that Jesus prefers us meditating on his words rather than getting a meal together. In order to us fully understand this passage, we need to place it in a setting. Jesus has sent out the 72 disciples, and they have returned with marvelous reports of the power of the name of Jesus. And Jesus then turned to the disciples and told them of the importance of knowing that he truly was the Messiah. And last week we read and heard about the Good Samaritan who went out of his way to care for the man who had fallen among thieves. And now Luke brings our attention to the picture of these two women. And Martha could have been like this Good Samaritan, going out of her way to get things together, going the extra mile. But in order to keep things straight, Jesus now gives a little more attention to Mary, listening to his words. It's not one over the other. Both actions are needed. However, at the point of life of Jesus, he's on his way to the crucifixion. He doesn't need a lot of food. He needs someone to listen to him. Well, there are two temperaments, as we can see, Martha and Mary. Martha is a person who is a dynamo activity. And because her name is mentioned there, as she has been the host, it's like her home. And I think there has to be some history behind Martha and Mary and Jesus. They're not just somebody coming into a local square and they, hey, come to our house, impromptu. But it's kind of an open invitation. You see, you didn't schedule a time when Martha would say, now on Thursday, I want you to come at 4 o'clock and come to my house and we'll have a steak or whatever. It was very impromptu. In that culture, it was acceptable. I will entertain a stranger. In one of my churches, I had one couple who older couple, every Sunday would set an extra plates and food for lunch. And they would figure out somebody new. And in that town of Lincoln, you kind of knew everybody. And they would invite that person to their home for dinner, impromptu. They did this continuously as an act of receiving a stranger. But Jesus shows up, and he has this invitation by Martha apparently ahead of time, but not the 12. You know, wouldn't it be something you say, come over for dinner, and you bring your extended family. And you're going, yikes. Do I have enough food? Spur of the moment. I have to tell you the story. We're having communion today. I reminded the story of my friend who told about the time that he was in a small church in Ohio. It's about the same size we are, 60, 70 people. And the gal in charge of communion had prepared for a normal 70 people for communion. Just before the service, a charter bus pulled up in front of the church. And out came 30 more people who were young people, were on their way back from a missions trip to Appalachia, and they came by that Sunday morning to stop by to encourage the church. And this gal is going, what am I going to do? I've got to get a lot more communion. And so she's rushing back into the kitchen, and she's trying to find, and she remembered, oh my goodness, I emptied the last jar of grape juice. Where's some more grape? Is there any Kool-Aid here? Anything? And she's frantically going through all the cupboards in the kitchen, and she found grape jelly. And she's thinking, I don't have time to go to the store. I don't know what to do. And so she's smashing up this grape jelly through the strainer, trying to get as much juice out to get 30 more communion cups out. And just before the sermon, before the communion, she naturally drops it in. And the pastor told me, he said, a lot of people were surprised that morning to have a first lumpy communion cup. But wasn't that really okay? What was going through the mind of Martha? What do I do now? How many loaves do we have? Did we have enough? How about fish? Do we have the fish? Olives? Do we have the olives? She's thinking to herself, now, do we do buffet style? Do we have enough places to sit? Do we enlarge the table? Do we have enough wine? How about the washing of the feet of the disciples? Who's going to provide the water? How are we going to do this? I think some of you ladies are going, yeah, I've been in that situation. You know, all of a sudden, here it is. What Martha was doing was important, but she needed help. I came across this little poem. Ladies may think of this. It says, Lord, all pots and pans and things, since I have no time to be a saint by doing lovely things, or watching late with thee, or dreaming in the dawn light, or storming heaven's gate, make me a saint by getting meals and washing the plates. And some of you are saints already. But Martha's exasperated. She needs help in the kitchen to feed all these people who have come to her house, and she calls Mary to help. Where is she? Where is she? She comes in the room, and there's Mary listening to Jesus. Now, Jesus is teaching. He's sitting down. Mary is on the floor, listening. And the word says, the information is that, one of the versions says that Martha stood over Jesus and her sister and kind of demands, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do all the serving? Tell her to help me. She is so upset with the arrangements. She isn't really concerned about anybody else's agenda. She has her own. Did she ever think that Jesus didn't want a 3-course or 7-course meal? Did she ever consider that Mary might have known that something was amiss with Jesus, that he was quieter because Mary had heard that he was on his way to Jerusalem to die? Perhaps there was a human stress of Jesus that Mary picked up on. Let's look at Mary for a moment. We find that she is taking the place of a disciple by sitting at the feet of the teacher, which was extremely unusual in that culture of that day. For a woman to be a disciple. But here she was. Now I want you to see the distinction between Mary and Martha. Martha has an agenda. She's driven. It has to be this way. And perhaps Mary is more attuned to the emotions of the day and the feel of the morning. Is she listening to Jesus? Her listening to Jesus more important than food? Jesus answers this question. He said, Martha, Martha, you are worried and upset, but only one thing is needed, and Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken from her. Interestingly, one of the translations of but only one thing is needed, it could read, I don't need a big meal. Give me a peanut butter sandwich and I'll be satisfied. I need someone to listen to me. I need someone who will contemplate what's happening. And Mary is listening. Have you ever thought that Jesus wants us to listen to him? Lord, what are you saying? I had a very interesting experience a number of years ago. I was in a seminar. We were talking about listening to the voice of the Lord. And our instructor said, I want you to do something today. I want you to take a piece of paper. I want you to pray in silence. Find a place of quietness. And I want you to write down what you believe Jesus is saying to you today. I thought that was strange. I'm in such a hurry. Have I sat and meditated what Jesus is saying to me today? Was he saying to me, Jim, you're talking too much, listen. Jim, you're worried too much, be quiet. I'm in charge. Jim, you're worried about the future, I'm already there. What's he saying to you? What's he saying to you? One of the things he does say to us this morning is, this is my body. This is my blood. And when you're eating it and drinking it, I become part of you, and you become part of me.